Chapter 4. I don't know why that swirl of energy was given to me to see that one night and never again. Maybe if I'd been the pensive type, I'd have wondered about it more and gotten wise a little earlier to what was going on. But because I never felt it again, I ended up writing it off to imagination, and I didn't mention it to Nathan or Paige. At Sunday dinner the next day, I gave a glowing report of our gig. When I told Nathan's parents that Egan had particularly asked Nathan to perform his own songs, Mrs. Whitley's smile grew radiant. Artis listened with a sort of reverent envy. Even Brother Whitley looked pleased, although we might have known he wasn't taking it seriously. "And he has the greatest recording studio upstairs," I told them. "He even offered to get some of our stuff down on tape." "What for?" Brother Whitley asked. "To make a demo. He has connections in Nashville, and he's even been out in L.A., I think." Brother Whitley wiped his mouth with his napkin and shook his head. "That's what he told you, huh?" he said good-naturedly. "Well, I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Wouldn't get my hopes up." Finally Nathan spoke, for the first time. He'd been quiet all through church, and we hadn't talked last night after the gig, either. Any other two guys our age would have stayed up drinking beer, discussing how it went. That was what my bandmates and I had always done after gigs in Sacramento. But after we got home, Nathan just lay on his bed and watched TV with the sound down, and finally I'd fallen asleep while he was still staring at the screen. Now he said, "We're going over there Thursday. He asked us to lunch, and we're going to record afterward." "You didn't tell me that," I almost said, but Nathan went on. "He wants us to make a demo tape for somebody he knows in Nashville. He says we're the kind of sound a lot of people are looking for." "Now, don't get stars in your eyes," his father told him. "I don't have stars in my eyes." "Sure you do. You're 20, son. Of course you do." "No, I just want to do my work, and when somebody offers me an opportunity to get my music out there—" "No, now, Nathan." This time Brother Whitley was the one staying calm. "Don't you get suckered into something that's going to peter out just because you want to be a star." "I don't want to be a star," Nathan said, but Brother Whitley's voice marched right over that. He was set on preaching another sermon. "You've got a higher responsibility," he said, as Mrs. Whitley rather nervously started to clear the table. "You can go ahead and play around this summer. I don't have a problem with that. But you're going back to school in the fall and getting your degree. Then you can go into any kind of music you want to, as long as it serves the Lord." He got up from the table. "Don't give him any money or sign anything," he said, and headed off to read the paper in his recliner. Artis rolled her eyes, and Mrs. Whitley kept her back to us at the sink. Nathan got up. His face was red, and I realized he was furious. "I'm going driving around," he said. "You want to?" So we took the station wagon out in the heat and drove south past River House. Nathan drove faster than usual, his eyes squinted against the sun, and his mouth holding an obstinate set. I watched the heat shimmering up off the road and wondered where we were going. At last Nathan turned onto a small gravel road and drove straight down to the river. He eased the car underneath a big sycamore tree facing the river bank. Scattered beer cans suggested that this was a general hangout, but today we were the only ones there. Nathan reached under the car seat and brought out a nickel bag of pot and some rolling papers and matches. I watched him roll a nice tight joint, light it, and take a long drag before he handed it to me. "Where'd you get it?" I asked him, taking a hit. "Egan." "He gave you pot?" Nathan blew out. "He asked me if I wanted some. I paid him." After he'd taken his second hit, he said, "I hate it when he talks like that." I knew he meant his dad now. I don't blame you. "Like all the music I'm working on right now is just—" He turned his head and blew smoke out the window. "Jerking off." "I wouldn't worry too much about what my dad thought," I told him. "It's your life. You know what's right for you." But now he'd changed, the obstinate look gone. What if I don't? What if I'm missing it, what God really wants me to do? God again. I remembered he'd talked about this that first time we were down at the river, but then it had seemed more like his father's concern. Now I saw that Nathan himself worried about it. "Nathan, man," I said from the deep wisdom of being stoned, "God doesn't give a fuck whether you play music or dig ditches." "I think you're wrong," he said. "God has something he wants everybody to do in this world, and we have to figure out what it is." "Oh, well, that's just great. And if we get it wrong, it's like—" I made a noise like a game show buzzer when somebody misses a question. Nathan didn't laugh. "Besides," I went on, "if that's true, then he's going to be so pissed off at me for not even trying to do what he wants me to do that he won't have time to worry about you." Nathan just sat, staring through the windshield. I scoured my brain for something that might help him, but I was at a loss. He and I were so different. Church, for example, had done absolutely nothing for me that morning. We didn't have communion, and I hadn't tried praying like I'd done the Sunday before. I don't think it even occurred to me. The whole service had left me feeling blank and sleepy. "Look," I said finally, "you've got this guy interested in your music right now, okay? And you've got the whole summer, even your dad's willing to give you that. So just go with it. We'll play music for him, lay down tracks, whatever, just for this summer." Nathan was listening, I could tell, and summer became the operative word in my pot-hazed mind. "Just for the summer," I told him. "Pretend this is what God wants you to do. He'll give you the summer, won't he, without zapping you with a lightning bolt?" Nate gave me a look for my irreverence, but I could see the idea was starting to take hold. "And if nothing pans out?" "Then you can go back to school this fall and write masses in F-sharp diminished and St. Elmo's Passions and put to the glory of God on all your orchestration assignments." He did laugh then. "You know that much about Bach?" "No kidding, Nate. Just for this summer, act like it's okay." "I've worried about it ever since I was little," he said in a rush. "What I'm supposed to do, and what if I get it wrong? I mean, not like I'm so special. I just think everybody is." "Man, where'd you get that? Your dad or church? What?" "I don't know." He took another hit. "It's just always been there, you know, in my head." Well, the heathen life for me, then, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. It would just depress him more. "God'll give you one summer," I said again. "Do whatever the hell you want." I wondered later if that conversation was what started it, if I didn't push him off in the wrong direction after all. Maybe if I'd been more sympathetic to his convictions, things would have been different. All I knew then was that he relaxed back into the car seat, not sitting so stiff and still, as if something had stopped hurting him. "Maybe you're right," he said. Pleased with myself, I leaned back too and enjoyed the feel of the Tennessee heat wrapping me, cocooning me. I was already pretty high, though, and my head buzzed with the cicadas and the rushing of the river. After a while I said, "You could be a choir director and write your own songs on the side." When he didn't answer, I looked over to see that he'd fallen asleep, not resting his eyes, but bona fide asleep, his head against the door frame. Carefully I plucked the joint out of his hand, lighted it again, and smoked it myself, not wanting to wake him any sooner than I had to. For all I knew, this was the first time he'd slept in days. I didn't know what to expect from Egan on Thursday when we showed up for lunch. River House looked deserted, almost forbidding, in the hot sun. But as we hesitated at the front steps, Egan came around from the side and waved at us. "Come on back," he said. "I've got the charcoal going." In the backyard we found a paradise. Tall trees, soft green grass, a long hill sloping all the way down to the river. Closer to the old-fashioned back porch lay a flagstone patio with a picnic table and an open ice chest. And Egan had steaks on the grill, beautiful, thick T-bones, along with some shrimp. A bowl of salad waited on the table. Even Paige seemed a little taken aback. When he'd said lunch, we'd figured he would get burgers from the dairy gym or something. We ventured slowly onto the patio, and Egan looked up from turning steaks and laughed at us. "Come on," he said. "Get comfortable. Grab whatever you want to drink out of that ice chest." "Can we do anything to help?" Paige asked. "No, these are almost ready. Go ahead, kick your shoes off." Egan was barefoot, in jeans and a plain shirt. Nathan and I wore jeans too, and Paige cutoffs and a green t-shirt. She looked terrific, her legs straight and firm. I saw Egan appraise them and glance at Nathan, maybe wondering, as I did, how Nate could be so casual with her. Paige slipped out of her sandals, and I undid my sneakers. The grass felt cool and wonderful to my feet. It was like being on a golf course with no stickers or stiff, poky weeds. Nathan sat in one of the patio chairs with a Coke and watched amusedly as Paige and I ran around in the grass, flinging ourselves down like puppies. Egan laughed too, and as he crossed the patio to get himself a Coke, I saw him nudge Nathan's foot with his own. "Relax," he said, though Nathan seemed relaxed enough to me. Nathan sat up straighter, looking a little confused, and after a minute he slowly leaned over and started untying his own shoes. Then, barefoot, he came out into the grass and sat down with us. Egan told us to stay put and brought us each a plate. Trying to eat steak out of our laps with silverware was awkward, so we gave up and ate the steaks off the bone with our fingers like cave people. It was a wonderful picnic. I don't remember what we talked about. I only remember that we did, the trees a high bower over us, not an ant or mosquito or fly on the place, and it was pure joy, that meal, with even Nathan laughing so hard once that he fell over sideways into the grass. Paige and I, of course, were manic, matching Egan wisecrack for wisecrack, and he didn't seem any older than we were. "This is the first time I've had anyone over here," he told us, after we'd eaten until we were stuffed and had all calmed down a little, "since I've moved to Berry Springs." "Great place to entertain," Paige said, tossing back her hair and looking up into the treetops. "And who better to have around for the first time but my new protégés?" Egan's smile lingered longest on Nathan, who was by now stretched full length in the grass watching us all contentedly. Even then, Paige and I took it for granted that Nathan was the one who interested Egan. I don't think it bothered either one of us. I know I didn't mind. We both knew as well as Egan did that Nathan was a musical genius. We were happy just to be along for the ride. Anyway, I remember clearly that there occurred one of those crystal-perfect moments when everyone is silent and everything hangs suspended, Paige's t-shirt and all the summer green around us turning her eyes to emerald, Nathan's long form relaxed in the grass, Egan's fall of hair catching the glints of sun, his pale, smiling eyes darting from one of our faces to another, the languorous power I felt all through me, even to the tips of my fingers, the roots of my hair. Then Egan got quickly to his feet, saying, "Well, shall we go up to the studio, see what happens?" We tried to help him clean up, but he waved us off, saying he could do it later on. So Nathan and I picked up our guitars, and we followed Egan through the back door of River House. In the stuffy, dark hall I could smell hot old wood and a faint odor like a kitchen sink drain. Sure enough, off to the right, I saw a kitchen that looked as if it hadn't been remodeled since 1930. Halfway up the steps the modern world crept back in as welcome air conditioning wafted down. "I haven't turned it on down in the bar yet," Egan explained. "Doesn't take long to cool off before I open at 5, so it doesn't pay me to leave it on all the time." We emerged into the luxury of his studio. He switched on a few lights over the soundboard and in the glass booth, but most of the light was soft green afternoon light from the big windows. "Have a seat," Egan said, and gestured toward the leather couch. Already Nathan looked nervous. He and Paige sat close together at one end of the couch, and I sat at the other end. Egan had gone to the stereo and was putting on a record. "Take a listen." Music arched into the room, a man's husky, graceful voice singing one of the most beautiful melodies I'd ever heard. Nathan's expression changed as he listened into an unutterable yearning to make music like that. Paige didn't look as impressed. She quirked one eyebrow at me in a kind of facial shrug. But Nathan bit his lip and looked at his hands, turning them over in his lap, then clenching his fists. I saw Egan watching him and wished he wouldn't be quite so transparent in his insecurity. "A little more cool, Nathan," I heard myself telling him, "a little less angst." The song ended after the requisite 3 minutes, the spell of it unbroken, even when the last note evaporated. Egan handed Nathan the album cover, and we saw the name Daniel Adams. "I produced this album," Egan explained. "Wanted to give you some idea of what I've done before, so you'll have a better feel for where I'm coming from." Paige handed the sleeve to me, and I could see for myself. Produced by Egan Coutts. Daniel Adams's face bothered me a little. He was handsome enough, but he looked confused. "Where's this guy now?" I asked, noting that the album was dated 3 years earlier. "Gone out to L.A." Egan was busy putting another album on the turntable. This time we heard fiddle music, earthy and haunting. This album sleeve showed a woman's face, a beautiful hippie-looking woman with a sad expression. "Produced by Egan Coutts," it read. Egan let it play for another minute, then lifted the needle. "Anyway, just so you'll know," he looked at Nathan. "Ready?" Nathan shrugged and nodded. "What do we do first?" "Why don't you take your guitar in the booth and play the first one you did the other night, the one about swinging out over the river. Then we can add Paige's vocals and Tim on rhythm and bass." Nathan looked uncertainly at the glass booth. Egan was doing mysterious things behind the board with knobs and switches. "Put on that pair of headphones," he told Nate. "Make yourself comfortable." Inside the booth, Nathan looked about as far from comfortable as I'd ever seen him, although Paige and I kept grinning at him reassuringly. But as he did the take, he sounded fine, the way he always did, his fingers strong and sure, his low voice projecting its peculiar soft intensity. When he was done, he looked at Egan again, as if hoping that now Egan would let him out of the cage. Egan said. "Pretty good for a first take. But I want you to relax, okay? Because listen." He rewound the tape to play it back, and Nathan's voice sounded through the speakers again. Only now we heard his voice quivering, his breath shaking as he tried to inhale slowly. I sat listening in surprise. I hadn't noticed him doing that. Paige shifted uncomfortably, and Nathan kept his eyes on his hands, the inside of his lip clamped in his teeth. He looked absolutely miserable, and it was then, I believe, that I started to dislike Egan. Egan leaned his hip against the edge of the board until the song was done, then stopped the tape. "See what I mean? Any hint of nerves is going to show up. Now take a couple of deep breaths and try it again. Think of getting the soul of the song across, the feel you were going for when you wrote it." Nathan nodded and wiped his palms on his jeans before repositioning his hands on the guitar. "He hates this," Paige whispered to me. Egan glanced at us and started the tape again. Nate sounded better this time, I could tell. I heard more emotion in his voice as he tried to get the soul of the song across, whatever that meant. This time I kept an eye on Egan to gauge his reaction. He started out listening blank-faced as the song opened, but every time I looked at him, his expression had deepened a little more in kind of a scary way as he kept his eyes narrowed on Nathan. His mouth opened a little, almost as if he were breathing through it. It was, frankly, the expression of someone having a private sexual experience, and I had to look away in disgust. He is hot for him, after all, I thought. That's what this whole thing is about. Paige evidently hadn't noticed, having kept her eyes on Nathan the whole time. As the last chord faded, I saw Egan shut his mouth and swallow, and then his expression clicked back to normal. "That was 100 times better, Nate," he said. "Listen." It did sound clearer, more confident, and Nathan's face brightened. He looked at me and Paige for the first time and smiled a little. Then he came out of the booth without asking, just as the song ended. Egan switched off the tape and looked at him questioningly. "Could I have some water?" Nathan asked. "Oh, sure." Egan went to a tiny refrigerator I hadn't noticed before and took out a small bottle. We'd never seen bottled water before. Even Perrier hadn't caught on the way it did a few years later, and Nathan eyed it dubiously. "Rather have a beer?" Egan asked. "No, this is fine." Nathan drained the bottle in a couple of gulps. Paige accepted some water too, and I had a beer. After that, it got kind of fun again. Egan let Paige lay down a harmony vocal, which she did with such insouciance that he could find nothing to criticize, and I did a rhythm track to support Nathan's original finger picking. Nathan stayed beside Egan part of the time, while Paige and I recorded, and Egan showed him how the board worked. I watched to see if he ever touched Nate, brushed against him, but he never did. Slowly I relaxed, perfectly willing to believe I'd been wrong about the whole thing. And I think it was that afternoon that we started calling him the River Man. I don't remember which one of us started it, but it came out of a joke about him living in the river house, so of course he was the River Man. He seemed to think it was funny, and to be pleased that we had a special nickname for him. He told us about some guy in Nashville he wanted to shop the demo to, and we made plans to do 5 more of Nathan's songs, one featuring Nathan on piano. "If you guys can give me a few afternoons a week," Egan said, shutting down the board and lights, "we'll have this baby put together in no time. We'll do some more Monday, how about it? Or Sunday, can you come over here Sunday? We could work all day since I won't have the bar open." "After church we could," Nathan said. "Ah, church, of course," Egan agreed, and his eyes narrowed to slits as he considered Nathan. Nate had slouched down on the leather sofa, his head thrown back tiredly. I saw how greenish his face looked and knew he'd hit some sort of wall. "We need to go, Nate. Come on," I said, and got busy with our guitar cases. Nathan didn't move, and even Egan looked at him sharply. Paige went to him and reached to take his hands in hers, her small fingers gripping his big helpless ones with surprising strength. "Come on, sweetie," she said lightly, and he managed to haul himself to his feet and smile at her a little. "Thanks a lot, Egan," I said briskly. I felt a little greenish myself. I wanted to get out of there, to have everything back to normal again. Somehow the whole thing was moving too fast, even for me. It felt good to be out in the hot sun again, and we all turned our faces up to it gratefully. Paige still had one arm tight around Nathan's waist. He wasn't quite leaning on her, but almost. I stowed the guitars in the back of the station wagon while Nathan and Paige murmured, still holding each other, beside her car. Then Nathan came over, looking healthier and somehow embarrassed. "Could you drive home? We're, going riding around. We haven't had any time alone since I've been back, and—" "No problem. I'll see you later." "Thanks," he said, tossing me his keys, and went back to fold himself into the passenger seat of Paige's car. They drove off in the opposite direction of Berry Springs, heading south, where Nathan had told me there wasn't much but kudzu between here and Birmingham. I knew what they were going to do, of course, and I drove home in a frenzy of jealousy, mixed with embarrassment at knowing I'd been in the way of them doing it any earlier. When you're 20, there is no worse combination of feelings. I wondered if they would go to the secluded place where Nate and I had gotten high last Sunday. I wondered if Paige had a blanket folded in the trunk of her car. At the parsonage, I found a note from Mrs. Whitley reminding us they had gone to Kirbyville for dinner and a movie. Fine. I wandered through the house a while, switching on lights as the sun set, trying and failing not to think of Paige and Nathan together, and finally I gave up and took a long, hot shower, getting myself off and thinking shamelessly about Paige the entire time. After that, I felt marginally better, found some ice cream in the kitchen, and took it into the den to watch TV. Actually, it was kind of nice having the place to myself. I wanted to zone out for a while, not rehash the entire session with Egan in my head as I was so prone to do. Maybe I should have tried this bass line, maybe done something hipper with that vocal. And for a couple of hours, I succeeded. About 8 o'clock, I heard Nathan coming in the back door. When he found me in the den, I lifted an eyebrow at him. "Have a nice time?" I inquired, and he blushed and sat down on the couch. I was lounging in his dad's recliner, prepared to jump out as soon as I heard the Whitleys coming home. "Sorry to run out on you," he said, "but hey, I don't blame you a bit. I'm surprised you haven't done it sooner. You don't have to hang around with me all the time." "Well," he said, "I was talking to Paige and—" "Really? You got some talking in, did you?" He gave in and laughed, turning even redder. "What I was going to say was that Paige said she'd talk to some girls she knows and she'll get you a date and the 4 of us can go out." Great, I said. Just tell any girl I'm a shorter version of Neil Young, and she'll jump at the chance. Nathan looked at me, surprised. I'd spoken more harshly than I'd meant to. You look all right. Looks aren't that big a deal anyway. Easy for you to say. I don't think most girls even go by looks. Easy for you to say, bro. Cut it out, he said. What's the matter with you? I couldn't seem to keep my mouth shut. Look, Nate, you're not exactly a troll, you know. I think you'd be singing a different tune if you looked like Woody Allen or somebody. You mean Paige wouldn't have anything to do with me? She told me how the two of you met, how you were playing the piano, and she thought you were so beautiful. Let me tell you, if it had been me playing that piano, she'd never have looked twice. Maybe that would just be your piano playing. And it's the same with Egan. You think he'd be as excited about recording us, marketing us, if you looked like Woody Allen, he supplied. Well, and Paige, too. She's not exactly dog meat. If you were both my level of looks, he wouldn't bother with any of us. You're crazy. Nathan sat back and pretended to watch TV. Listen, you didn't see him looking at you today. I think he's a queer. He looks at you like he wants to jump your bones. Nathan only rolled his eyes. You are crazy, he said. Hey, did she really say that? Who? Paige, about when she first met me. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. And while I would have been ecstatic to know a girl had called me beautiful, Nathan only scowled and studied the calluses on his fingertips. She told me it was the music she liked, he said finally. People are physical, Nate. I'm telling you, if it had been me or Woody Allen playing that piano— Will you shut up about Woody Allen, he snapped, and that rare flash of temper showed me I'd gone too far, pushed too hard. Sorry, I said. You're right. It's not a big deal. It's just, he ran his hands back through his hair, struggling for words. Music is the only real thing about me, he said finally. Not the way I look, or anything else. That made no sense to me then, grounded as I was in appearances, but I'd have done well to remember it. At the time, I only felt bad about getting him riled, and backpedaled as fast as I could. I know, I get too wrapped up in surface stuff. It's me, not you. He simmered down a little more and finally asked what I was watching. I thought then that it had blown over. But I had injected some little worm of mistrust into him, and I would give anything if I had been able to keep my mouth shut that night. Amazing what jealousy can do. In the time of tree and star and presents all aglow, she saw him wrapped in angel garb and tied up with a bow. She saw the face, the tinsel trim, she heard the music too. She pulled the string to open him to see what he would do. No time now for making sense. Her face is shining in the ornaments. The colored paper made her smile, and she imagined more. A glowing star, a gifted child, until the paper tore. No time now for making sense. Her face is shining in the ornaments. I marvel now to realize how many songs Nathan had already composed. At this point in the summer, he hadn't even started writing hard for Egan, and still he must have had at least a dozen tunes. Some of them were derivative, sure, bluesy piano tunes, a Beatles lick here and there. But so many of them, like this one, are strong and unique, pure Nathan, his lyrics a direct window into his head, the music a main line from his heart. I wonder if Paige ever understood that this song was about her and Nathan. It's something I'll never ask her.